My daughter sold my luxury penthouse for $1.8 million while I was on vacation and called me a homeless person when I confronted her. At 72 years old, after working my entire life to secure my future, I found myself standing in front of my own door with nowhere to go. But what Emily didn't know, what she couldn't have known, is that I wasn't the helpless old woman she thought I was. I'm Sophia Wilson, and this is how I fought back against the ultimate betrayal. For 40 years, I'd worked myself to the bone. Started as a secretary at a Manhattan law firm in the 70s, worked my way up to office manager, and eventually became a senior paralegal. Every promotion was hard-earned. Every dollar I saved went toward building a life I could be proud of. By the time I retired, I'd managed to purchase my Upper East Side penthouse outright. No mortgage, no debt. It was mine. 23 years of memories in a place with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light just perfectly, with a reading nook by the fireplace where I'd spend my evenings with a cup of chamomile tea. That penthouse wasn't just a home. It was proof that I'd made it, that a woman who started with nothing could build something solid and lasting. It was my sanctuary, my reward for decades of sacrifice. But lately I'd been feeling drained. Not just physically, though. At 72, my knees weren't what they used to be, but mentally exhausted. My daughter Emily had been calling more frequently, always with some new crisis. Her husband James's business wasn't doing well. They were stressed about money. Could I help them out just until they got back on their feet? I'd helped before, a few thousand here and there over the years, but it never seemed enough. There was always another emergency, another desperate plea. And Emily had changed, or maybe I was finally seeing her clearly. She wasn't the little girl who used to bring me dandelions from the park anymore. She was a grown woman with her own family, her own problems. And increasingly she seemed to view me as an ATM rather than her mother. That's why I booked the Vermont trip. 3 weeks in a cozy cabin near Stowe, hiking through the mountains, visiting small towns, doing some antiquing. 3 weeks to clear my head and figure out how to set boundaries with my own daughter without destroying our relationship. My final day in Vermont was perfect blue skies, crisp autumn air, the mountains ablaze with fall colors. I spent the morning at a local farmer's market buying small gifts for my grandchildren, a hand-carved wooden train for Jacob, my 9-year-old grandson, and a beaded bracelet for Lily, my 12-year-old granddaughter. I remember thinking about how excited they'd be to see their grandmother, how I'd tell them stories about the mountains, maybe plan a trip to bring them back with me someday. The drive back to Manhattan was long but pleasant. I listened to audiobooks, stopped at charming roadside diners, took my time. I wasn't in any rush. Why would I be? I was heading home to my safe place, my reward for a lifetime of hard work. I pulled into my building's parking garage late in the afternoon. The security gate opened as it always did. I parked in my assigned spot, number 47, the same spot I'd had for years. Everything seemed normal. I rolled my suitcase toward the elevator, already thinking about the first thing I'd do when I got upstairs. Maybe order some Thai food from that place down the street, call Emily to tell her about the trip. I had no idea I'd never make it past my own front door. The elevator ride up to the 15th floor felt exactly as it always had, the same soft hum, the same gentle jolt when it stopped. I stepped out into the familiar hallway, already fishing for my keys. Mrs. Goldstein from 15C was watering the plants in the hallway like she did every Tuesday. "Welcome back, dear," she called out. "How was your trip? Wonderful?" I said, smiling. "I'll tell you all about it later." Everything was normal. Everything was fine. I reached my door 15G, the corner unit with the best views in the entire building, and slid my key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I jiggled it a bit, thinking maybe the lock was stiff from disuse. Sometimes that happened after I'd been gone for a while. But nothing. The key wouldn't even go in all the way. That's when I noticed it. The lock itself looked different, newer, shinier. My stomach did a small flip, but I pushed the feeling down. Maybe building maintenance had replaced the locks. They'd done that once before, years ago, after a break-in on the 3rd floor. They must have forgotten to give me the new key. I pressed the doorbell once, twice, 3 times. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see movement inside. Someone was home. Good. They'd let me in and I could figure this out. The door opened, but only part way. A chain lock held it in place. A man I'd never seen before stared out at me. He was maybe 40, with a neatly trimmed beard and suspicious eyes. "Yes," he said. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice pleasant despite the confusion swirling in my head. I'm sorry to bother you, but I think there's been some kind of mix-up with the locks. I live here. This is my penthouse. The man's eyebrows drew together. What? I'm Sophia Wilson. I live here. I've lived here for over 20 years. I held up my key ring, showing him my keys. See, I have keys. I just got back from vacation and… Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. He glanced back over his shoulder and I could see a woman appear behind him, his wife, I assumed. Honey, there's someone at the door saying she lives here. The woman stepped forward, her face a mixture of concern and irritation. What's going on? This is my home, I repeated, hearing my voice shake now. There must be some mistake. Did maintenance let you in? Are you doing repairs? The man shook his head slowly. We're not doing repairs. We own this place. We bought it 3 weeks ago. Closed on it, moved in everything. The world seemed to tilt sideways. That's impossible, I whispered. You can't have bought it. It's not for sale. It's mine. The woman crossed her arms. Look, I don't know what's happening here, but we have the deed. We went through a real estate agent, signed all the papers, did the whole closing process. This is our home now. Who sold it to you? The words came out sharper than I intended. Who told you they could sell this property? The man and woman exchanged glances. Your daughter, the man said finally. Emily Blackwood. She's the one who handled the whole sale. Said you were moving into a care facility and wanted to liquidate your assets. My legs went weak. I reached out and gripped the doorframe to steady myself. My daughter, I repeated numbly. Yeah, nice lady. She had all the paperwork, power of attorney, everything. Our lawyer checked it all out. It was completely legal. I couldn't breathe. The hallway seemed to be closing in around me. Ma'am, are you okay? The woman asked, her voice softening slightly. You look pale. Do you need to sit down? I shook my head, taking a step back. I need to make a phone call. Look, the man said, his tone gentler now. I don't know what's going on here, but we bought this place fair and square. We have kids moving into the school district next month. We sold our old house to afford this one. Whatever's happening between you and your daughter, you need to work it out with her, not us. The door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the door that had been mine for 23 years. The door I'd painted a custom shade of deep blue because it reminded me of the ocean. The door that had a tiny scratch near the bottom where I'd once dropped my keys. Except now it wasn't blue anymore. It was gray. A plain, unremarkable gray. They'd even repainted my door. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Emily's number. My thumb hovered over it for just a moment. Part of me didn't want to call. Part of me wanted to believe this was all some horrible misunderstanding that could be explained away. Maybe Emily had rented the place out while I was gone. Maybe she'd thought I was staying in Vermont longer. There had to be a reasonable explanation. But deep down in that place where mothers know things about their children even when they don't want to, I already knew the truth. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Mom, you're back. Emily's voice was bright, almost cheerful, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just destroyed my entire life. Emily, my voice came out hoarse. Why are there strangers living in my penthouse? Silence on the other end. Not the silence of confusion, but the silence of someone who's been caught and is trying to decide how to respond. Emily, answer me. Why did you sell my home? I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Then came that sigh. That heavy, exaggerated sigh I'd heard 1,000 times before, the one she used when she thought I was being difficult. Mom, okay, listen. I can explain. Then explain. I was still standing in the hallway, my suitcase beside me, staring at the door that was no longer mine. Mrs. Goldstein had gone back into her apartment, probably sensing the tension. Explain to me why strangers are living in my penthouse. You're being dramatic, Emily said, her voice taking on that edge of impatience. It's not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal? I felt heat rising in my chest. Emily, this is my home. I've lived here for over 2 decades. You had no right to sell it. Actually, Mom, I did have the right. Remember that power of attorney you signed when you had your heart surgery? Well, James and I talked to a lawyer, and technically I could make financial decisions on your behalf if necessary. My mind was reeling. That was for medical emergencies. That was so you could pay my hospital bills if something went wrong during surgery. It wasn't permission to sell my property behind my back. Well, our lawyer said it was legal, so... She trailed off as if that settled everything. Your lawyer, I repeated slowly. Emily, whose lawyer did you talk to? James's friend from college. He practices real estate law. He looked over everything and said we were fine. Of course. Not an independent attorney, not someone who might have actually explained what power of attorney meant. Someone who would tell them exactly what they wanted to hear. Emily, why would you do this? My voice cracked. Why would you sell my home without even telling me? Another pause, then quietly, almost defensively, we needed the money, Mom. You needed the money, I echoed. Yes, James has debts, serious ones. We were about to lose everything. The bank was threatening to foreclose on our house. We had creditors calling every single day. What were we supposed to do? You were supposed to talk to me. The words came out louder than I intended, bouncing off the hallway walls. You were supposed to call me and explain the situation. You were supposed to ask for help, not just steal from me. We're not stealing, Mom. God, you always make everything so dramatic. We got fair market value for the penthouse. The money went into an account. You'll get some of it once we sort out James's debts. Some of it, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Emily, that was my home. That was my security. That was everything I worked my entire life to build. And now you'll have cash instead. Isn't that better? You're getting older, Mom. You don't need a big place like that anymore. We were actually doing you a favor. A favor? She thought she was doing me a favor. Where exactly did you think I was going to live when I got back from Vermont? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I don't know. You have options. You can rent something smaller. Maybe get one of those senior apartments with the activities and stuff. You'd probably like that better anyway. More people your age to hang out with. I closed my eyes, trying to control the anger that was threatening to overwhelm me. So you sold my home, took my money to pay your husband's debts, and just assumed I'd figure out where to live on my own. Well, you're smart. You always figure things out. Her tone was so casual, so dismissive, as if we were discussing what to have for dinner, rather than the destruction of my entire life. Look, Mom, I really don't have time for this right now. James and I are dealing with a lot of stress. The last thing I need is you making this harder than it has to be. Making this harder, I felt like I was talking to a stranger. Emily, do you hear yourself right now? Do you understand what you've done? What I've done is saved my family from financial ruin. You're my mother. You're supposed to want to help your children. Isn't that what parents do? Help? Yes. But you didn't ask for help. You stole from me. It's not stealing if it's legal, Mom. And it was legal. I have the paperwork to prove it. Legal doesn't mean right, Emily. She made a sound of frustration. You know what, I'm not doing this with you right now. You're upset. I get it. But you'll see that this was the best decision for everyone once you calm down and think rationally about it. Rationally, Emily, I'm standing in front of my own home with nowhere to go. How is that rational? Stop being so dramatic. You're not homeless. You have money. You have resources. Just go to a hotel for tonight and we'll talk about this later when you're not being so emotional. When I'm not being so emotional, I repeated, my voice flat now. Yeah, look, I have to go. James needs me. We'll talk soon, okay? Emily, don't you dare hang up on me. We need to discuss this right now. There's nothing to discuss. It's done. The house is sold. The money is being used for what we needed it for. I'm sorry you're upset, but that doesn't change anything. Goodbye, Mom. The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. She'd hung up on me. My own daughter had sold my home, taken my security, and then hung up on me when I tried to talk about it. Mrs. Goldstein's door opened a crack. Dear, are you all right? I heard shouting. I turned to look at her, and I must have looked terrible, because her expression immediately filled with concern. I'm fine, I managed to say, though we both knew it was a lie. Just a family situation. She nodded slowly. If you need anything... Thank you. I picked up my suitcase handle. I need to find a hotel. As I walked back toward the elevator, pulling my suitcase behind me, I felt something shift inside me. The shock was fading, replaced by something colder, something sharper. Emily thought this was over. She thought I'd cry for a bit, maybe get angry, and then accept what she'd done. Because what choice did I have? But she'd made a mistake. She'd forgotten something important about me. I didn't build my life by accepting things I couldn't change. I built it by changing the things I couldn't accept. and I was about to remind her of that. The hotel room was nothing like my penthouse. Beige walls, a generic landscape painting a bed that was too soft and pillows that were too flat. But it had a roof and a lock on the door, and right now, that was all I needed. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in the same clothes I'd worn on the drive home, and stared at the wall. My suitcase lay open on the floor, untouched. I couldn't bring myself to unpack. Unpacking meant accepting that this was real, that I was actually staying in a hotel because my own daughter had sold my home. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Mom, I know you're upset, but you need to understand we had no choice. James's business failed, and we were desperate. You would have done the same thing if you were in our position." I deleted it without responding. Another buzz. "Also, you're being really selfish right now. We're your family. Family helps each other." Deleted. I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the nightstand. I couldn't deal with her right now. Not when my hands were still shaking. Not when I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. But sitting here feeling sorry for myself wasn't going to solve anything. I needed to understand exactly what had happened. I needed to see the full picture. I pulled my laptop out of my carry-on bag. One of the benefits of being meticulous, my entire life, was that I kept digital copies of everything important. Property deeds, bank statements, legal documents, all organized in folders, all backed up to the cloud. I opened the file labeled Property Documents and started reading through the deed to my penthouse. I'd bought it outright in 2000 for $670,000. Every month for years before that I'd saved. I'd skipped vacations. I'd driven an old car. I'd made sacrifices because I wanted something that was mine, something that couldn't be taken away. Or so I'd thought. Next, I opened the power of attorney document I'd signed 2 years ago. I remembered that day clearly. I'd been scheduled for heart surgery, and my lawyer, Andrew Hamilton, had recommended having someone designated to make medical and financial decisions if I was incapacitated during the procedure. It was standard precaution, he'd said. Smart planning. I'd asked Emily to take on that role. She was my only child. Who else would I trust? I read through the document now with fresh eyes. The language was clear. The power of attorney was meant for situations where I was unable to make decisions for myself. Medical emergencies. Cognitive decline situations where I genuinely needed someone to step in and act on my behalf. It was never meant to give Emily carte blanche to sell my property while I was on vacation. I pulled up my email and searched for messages from Emily over the past month. There had to be something, some indication of what she'd been planning. The first email I found was from 5 weeks ago. "Hey Mom, hope you're excited for your trip. We should grab lunch before you leave. Want to go over some paperwork while we're together." Paperwork. My stomach tightened. I vaguely remembered that lunch. We'd met at a cafe near her house in Westchester. Emily had seemed distracted, kept checking her phone. She'd brought a folder with her, said something about updating my emergency contacts and making sure all my documents were current. I'd signed a few things without reading them closely. She was my daughter. I trusted her. What had I signed? I kept scrolling through emails. 3 weeks ago, while I was in Vermont, there was an email from a real estate agency I'd never heard of. The subject line read, "Congratulations on your sale." I opened it with trembling fingers. "Dear Ms. Wilson, congratulations on the successful sale of your property at 1847 Park Avenue, Unit 15G. The closing is scheduled for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Please review the attached documents and contact us if you have any questions." There were attachments, PDFs of sale documents. I downloaded them and started reading. The sale price was listed as $1.8 million. The penthouse had appreciated significantly over the years, especially after they'd renovated the building 5 years ago. But the money wasn't going into my account. According to the wire transfer instructions, it was being sent to an account in Emily and James's names. My hands clenched into fists. I kept reading. There was my signature on the sales agreement, except it wasn't quite my signature. It was close. Someone had practiced it, copied my handwriting style, but I could see the differences. The way the S in Sophia looped slightly wrong, the way the W in Wilson was too sharp. Emily had forged my signature. This wasn't just a misuse of power of attorney. This was fraud forgery. She hadn't made a mistake or misunderstood the legal documents. She deliberately faked my signature to sell my home without my knowledge. I sat back feeling nauseous. How long had she been planning this? Had she thought about it during that lunch, watching me sign those updated emergency contact forms? Had she practiced my signature at home trying to get it just right? Had James helped her, or was this all her idea? My mind went back through the past few months looking for signs I'd missed. Emily's increasingly frequent calls about money, the way she'd ask detailed questions about my finances disguised as concern about my retirement planning, the time she'd offered to help me organize my important documents and spent an entire afternoon photographing papers in my home office. She'd been gathering information, building a case, preparing to take everything from me. I opened another folder on my laptop, bank statements. I wanted to see if there had been any other unusual activity. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, there had been small withdrawals from my savings account. Nothing huge, $1,000 here, $2,000 there. Amounts small enough that I might not notice right away, especially since I'd been busy planning my vacation. Emily had access to my accounts as my power of attorney. She'd been siphoning money from me for months. The total came to almost $18,000. I pressed my hands against my face, trying to steady my breathing. This was worse than I'd thought. So much worse. This wasn't a desperate decision made in a moment of panic. This was calculated, planned, methodical. My daughter had been stealing from me for half a year, and I'd been too trusting to notice. I thought about James, his gambling debts, according to what that couple at my door had said. I'd always known he was irresponsible with money, but I'd never imagined it was this bad. Bad enough that they'd resort to this. Or maybe this was all Emily. Maybe James was just the excuse. I didn't know anymore. I didn't know my own daughter anymore. The woman who used to call me every Sunday just to chat. The woman who'd cried in my arms when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The woman who'd asked me to help her pick out her wedding dress. Where had that person gone? When had she become someone who could do this to her own mother? I stood up and walked to the window. The hotel overlooked a parking lot. Gray, concrete, yellow lines, cars coming and going. People living their normal lives while mine fell apart. But even as I stood there, even as the hurt threatened to consume me, something else was building underneath it. Something stronger than pain. Resolve. Emily thought she'd won. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She'd taken my home, my money, my trust, and she'd hung up on me like I was an inconvenience. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me. I'd spent 40 years in the legal field. I knew how the system worked. I knew what fraud looked like. I knew how to build a case. And I knew people who could help me. I picked up my phone and turned it back on. Ignored the 3 new texts from Emily. Instead, I scrolled to a different contact, Andrew Hamilton, my lawyer, my friend, someone I'd known for 30 years. It was late, almost 9 in the evening, but I called anyway. He picked up on the second ring. "Sophia, everything all right?" "Andrew," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need your help. My daughter just stole everything from me and I need to get it back." Andrew met me at his office the next morning. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through everything I'd discovered. But when I walked into that familiar building on 5th Avenue, the same office where I'd worked as a paralegal decades ago, I felt something I hadn't felt since returning from Vermont. Hope. Andrew was waiting in the lobby. He'd aged since I'd seen him last, more gray and his hair deeper lines around his eyes, but his handshake was firm and his expression was serious. "Come on up," he said. "I've already cleared my morning." We rode the elevator in silence. I was grateful he didn't try to make small talk or offer empty reassurances. Andrew had always been practical that way. We'd worked together long enough that he knew when to speak and when to listen. His office looked exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal texts. A massive oak desk covered in neat stacks of files. The same coffee maker in the corner that had been there since 1987. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "Tell me everything." So I did. I started with the vacation, the return home, the stranger at my door. I told him about the phone call with Emily, about the forged signatures I'd found, about the months of small withdrawals from my account. I showed him the documents I'd printed from my laptop, the emails, the bank statements. Andrew listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "Sophia, I'm so sorry this happened to you." "I don't need apologies," I said quietly. "I need to know if I can fix this." He leaned forward, spreading the documents across his desk. "Let me be very clear about something. What Emily did wasn't just wrong. It was illegal. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, misuse of power of attorney. This isn't a gray area. This is criminal. Can I get my home back? That's the goal, he said. But I need to be honest with you about what we're facing. The couple who bought your penthouse, they're innocent victims in this too. They purchased the property in good faith. Getting the sale reversed is going to require proving that the transaction was fraudulent from the start. I have proof, I said, pointing to the documents. The forged signature, the unauthorized use of power of attorney, the fact that I was out of the country and had no knowledge of the sale. That's a good start. Andrew pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. We'll need more, though. We need to document everything timeline of events communications with Emily, proof that you never intended to sell testimony from people who can verify your mental competency and that you weren't planning to move into assisted living. Mrs. Goldstein, I said. My neighbor. She saw me the day I got back. She can testify that I had no idea what had happened. Good. Who else? I thought for a moment. My doctor. I just had my annual checkup before the trip. He can confirm I'm of sound mind and body. And there's Margaret Chen, a friend from my book club. I had lunch with her 2 days before I left for Vermont. I told her how excited I was to come back home. Andrew wrote it all down. We'll need bank records showing the unauthorized withdrawals. We'll need the original power of attorney document to show it was meant for medical purposes only. And we'll need to move fast. The longer that couple lives in your penthouse, the more complicated this gets. How fast can we move? I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing this afternoon. That should freeze any further transfer of funds and put the property status in question. Then we'll petition for a full hearing. He paused, looking at me over his reading glasses. Sophia, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Emily is your daughter. Taking her to court, potentially pressing criminal charges that's going to destroy whatever relationship you have left. She destroyed it when she forged my name and sold my home. I said, my voice steady. I gave her life. I raised her. I sacrificed for her. And she repaid me by stealing everything I worked for. Whatever relationship we had ended the moment she decided I was worth less to her than money. Andrew nodded slowly. All right then, let's talk strategy. We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. Andrew made phone calls to colleagues, pulled up case law, drafted preliminary documents. He contacted a forensic document examiner who could analyze the forged signature. He reached out to a private investigator who could dig into James's financial history and gambling debts. If we can prove that James was in severe financial trouble and that Emily knew about it, that establishes motive, Andrew explained. It shows this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional theft. By noon, I felt like I could breathe again. Not because the problem was solved, but because I finally had a path forward. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just a victim. I was fighting back. One more thing, Andrew said as I was gathering my things to leave. Emily's going to contact you, probably soon. She's going to realize you're not just accepting this, and she's going to try to manipulate you. She might apologize. She might cry. She might try to make you feel guilty for taking legal action against your own daughter. I know. Don't engage with her. Don't answer her calls or texts. Everything from this point forward goes through me. Can you do that? I thought about all the times Emily had manipulated me over the years. The guilt trips, the emotional blackmail, the way she'd twist situations to make herself the victim. I'd fallen for it every time because I loved her, because I wanted to believe my daughter was a good person who just made mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. A series of choices made over months, all designed to take advantage of the person who loved her most. Yes, I said. I can do that. Andrew walked me to the elevator. We're going to get your home back, Sophia. I promise you that. I nodded. But as the elevator doors closed, I realized something. Getting my home back wasn't enough. It wasn't just about the penthouse or the money. It was about justice. It was about making sure Emily understood that actions have consequences, that you can't just take what you want from people and walk away unscathed. She thought I was weak, an easy target, an old woman who'd just accept whatever her daughter decided was best for her. She was about to learn how wrong she was. My phone buzzed. Another text from Emily. Mom, seriously, you need to stop being so stubborn. Just accept that this is what's best for everyone, and move on. You're embarrassing yourself. I smiled. A cold smile. The kind of smile you get when you know something the other person doesn't. Emily had no idea what was coming, but she was about to find out. 3 days later, I sat in a small conference room in Andrew's office, surrounded by people I'd never met, but desperately needed. There was Diana Chen, the forensic document examiner Andrew had recommended. Beside her sat Marcus Rivera, a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. And across from me was Andrew himself, a stack of folders growing taller by the hour. "Let's start with the signature analysis," Andrew said, nodding to Diana. Diana pulled out a magnifying device and positioned it over the sales documents. "Mrs. Wilson, I've examined both the signature on the property sale and samples of your actual signature from various documents over the years. There are significant differences." She pointed to the screen where she'd projected enlarged images of the signatures side by side. "See here, your natural signature has a very distinctive flow. The S in Sophia curves back slightly and connects to the O, but in the forged signature that connection is absent. The person who signed this tried to copy your style but didn't understand the muscle memory behind it." I leaned closer, studying the images. She was right. I'd been signing my name the same way for 50 years. You don't think about it, you just do it. But someone trying to copy it would have to think about every stroke, and that shows. "There are at least 8 distinct differences I can point to," Diana continued. "The pressure points are wrong. The speed of writing is inconsistent. And most tellingly, there's a slight tremor in the forged signature that suggests hesitation. Someone was nervous when they signed your name." "Can you testify to this in court?" Andrew asked. "Absolutely. I'll prepare a full report with detailed analysis. This signature is definitely not authentic." Andrew made a note. "Good. That's solid evidence of forgery. Marcus, what did you find about the financial situation?" Marcus opened his laptop and turned it to face us. "James Blackwood is in deep trouble. I'm talking about over $250,000 in debt accumulated over the last 18 months. Most of it from gambling." My stomach dropped. $250,000. It was worse than I'd imagined. "He's got accounts at 3 different casinos in Atlantic City plus online gambling sites," Marcus continued. "He's also been borrowing from private lenders, the kind that charge interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. I found evidence of at least 5 different loans, all at rates above 20% annually." "How did it get this bad?" I asked. Marcus glanced at Andrew, then back to me. "From what I can tell, he started small. Regular casino visits, nothing too alarming. But about 2 years ago, something changed. The amounts got bigger, the frequency increased. Classic gambling addiction pattern. He'd win a little, think he could win more, then lose it all and try to win it back. And Emily knew. Oh, she knew." Marcus clicked to another screen showing bank statements. "These are from their joint account. Look at these transactions. Large cash withdrawals, always just under $10,000 to avoid triggering bank reporting requirements. Emily made most of these withdrawals herself." I stared at the dates. Some of them were from over a year ago. Emily had been dealing with this for that long and never said a word to me. Never asked for help. Just let it build until they decided the only solution was to steal my home. "There's more," Marcus said. "James's business, the consulting firm he claimed was doing so well, it's been operating at a loss for 3 years. He's been falsifying tax documents showing income that doesn't exist. The IRS hasn't caught on yet, but they will." Andrew leaned back in his chair, processing everything. "So we have a clear motive. Desperate financial situation, mounting debts, and a mother-in-law with substantial assets. Marcus, did you find any evidence that they planned this in advance?" "I'm still working on that, but I found something interesting." Marcus pulled up an email thread. "This is from 5 months ago, an email from Emily to James with the subject line Mom's Properties. In it, she's discussing the current market value of your penthouse and speculating about what they could get for it." 5 months ago, long before I'd even planned my Vermont trip. "She was researching how to sell my home 5 months ago," I said, my voice hollow. "It gets worse," Marcus said gently. "I found text messages between Emily and a real estate agent from 6 weeks ago. She was asking about how to handle a sale when the owner was temporarily unavailable. The agent gave her information about power of attorney sales." 6 weeks ago, right before she'd invited me to that lunch where I'd signed those papers. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Every new piece of information was another weight pressing down on my chest. "Mrs. Wilson, are you all right?" Diana asked. "You've gone pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Please continue." Andrew gave me a concerned look but nodded to Marcus to keep going. I also pulled Emily's credit card statements, Marcus said. In the weeks leading up to the sale, she made several purchases that suggest she was preparing for this. She bought a notary stamp online. She purchased tracing paper and high-quality pens. She even bought a book about document forgery. I closed my eyes. Each detail was another nail in the coffin of any doubt I might have had. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. My daughter had researched, planned, and executed a calculated theft. The notary who witnessed the signature, Andrew interjected. Marcus, were you able to find out anything about them? Yes, his name is Kevin Foster. He's a mobile notary who advertises quick, no-questions-asked service. I spoke to him yesterday, pretending I needed documents notarized. He admitted off the record that he doesn't always verify identities thoroughly if the client seems trustworthy. I'd bet money Emily paid him extra to look the other way. Can we prove that? Andrew asked. Not yet, but I'm working on it. If I can get his bank records showing an unusually large payment from Emily around the time of the notarization, that would be damning. Andrew turned to me. Sophia, I know this is hard to hear, but this is actually good news from a legal standpoint. We're not dealing with a misunderstanding or a gray area. This is clear, premeditated fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. I nodded slowly. Good news. It felt strange to call it that when every piece of evidence felt like another betrayal. There's one more thing, Marcus said, his voice softer now. I looked into Emily's personal accounts separate from the joint account with James. She's been moving money, small amounts transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands. It started about 2 weeks after the Penthouse sale. She's hiding assets, Andrew said immediately. She knew this might catch up with her eventually. She's trying to squirrel money away where it can't be touched. The Cayman Islands. My daughter had gone so far as to open offshore accounts. This wasn't just theft. This was sophisticated financial crime. I stood up and walked to the window. The street below was busy with afternoon traffic. People heading home from work, running errands, living normal lives. I used to have a normal life. I used to worry about normal things like whether I'd planted my tomatoes too early or if I needed to replace the filter in my air conditioner. Now I was standing in a lawyer's office learning that my only child had spent months planning to rob me. Mrs. Wilson. Marcus's voice brought me back. I know this is a lot to take in. How much did they get? I asked, still looking out the window. From the sale of my penthouse. How much money did they actually receive? $1.8 million, Andrew said quietly. Minus closing costs and agent fees. Probably around 1.7 million net. 1.7 million, my life's work, my security, my home. All gone to feed James's gambling addiction and whatever else they'd spent it on. How much is left? Marcus hesitated. Based on what I can find, maybe $500,000. The rest has been used to pay off debts, though not all of them. James still owes money to several creditors. Some of it went to the offshore account, and there are large cash withdrawals I can't trace. Could be more gambling. Could be something else. $1.2 million spent or hidden in just 3 weeks. I turned back to face them. What happens next? Andrew gathered his papers. Next we go to court. We file for the emergency injunction tomorrow. We present all of this evidence. We ask the judge to reverse the sale, freeze all of Emily and James's accounts, and start criminal proceedings for fraud and elder abuse. Will it work? With evidence like this? Yes, I'm confident we'll win. The question isn't if it's when and how much damage Emily and James do to themselves trying to fight it. I sat back down feeling exhausted. Exhausted, but also strangely clear-headed. The investigation had given me something I desperately needed. Not just evidence, but understanding. I understood now that this wasn't about me. It wasn't something I'd done wrong or failed to see. This was about Emily and James, making choices, terrible choices, criminal choices. And now they were going to face the consequences of those choices. Thank you, I said to everyone in the room. All of you for helping me see the truth. Diana packed up her equipment. Happy to help, Mrs. Wilson. No one should have to go through what you're going through. As everyone filed out, Andrew stayed behind. Sophia, there's something else we need to discuss. When we go to court, Emily is going to try to paint herself as the victim. She'll say she was just trying to help, that James pressured her, that she didn't understand what she was doing. Let her try, I said. We have emails, text messages, evidence of planning. A jury will see through it. They will, Andrew agreed. But I need to prepare you. She's your daughter. Seeing her in court watching her try to defend the indefensible, it's going to hurt. It already hurts, I said quietly. Every day since I came home it's hurt. But you know what hurts more? The thought of letting her get away with it. The thought of other people thinking it's okay to treat their parents this way. No, she made her choices. Now she lives with them. Andrew nodded, satisfied. All right then. Court date is set for Monday, 3 days from now. Get some rest this weekend. You're going to need your strength. As I left the office and stepped out into the late afternoon sun, I felt different, lighter somehow. The investigation had shown me the full scope of the betrayal, yes, but it had also shown me that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What had been done to me was wrong, and I had every right to fight back. Emily had counted on me being too hurt, too confused, too defeated to do anything about it. She'd counted wrong. I didn't tell Andrew I was going to see Emily. He would have tried to stop me. Reminded me that all communication should go through him, warned me about saying something that could hurt our case. And he would have been right. But this wasn't about the case. Not entirely. This was about looking my daughter in the eye and making her understand that I knew exactly what she'd done. I drove to her house on Saturday afternoon. It was a modest 2-story colonial in Westchester, the kind of place that screamed middle-class respectability. Neat lawn 2-car garage, a basketball hoop in the driveway. From the outside, you'd never guess the people who lived here had just committed fraud. I sat in my rental car for a moment, gathering my courage. Through the living room window, I could see movement. Emily was home. Good. I walked up the front path and rang the doorbell. Waited. Heard footsteps inside. The door opened. Emily stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she saw me, her expression shifted from curious to annoyed in the space of a heartbeat. "Mom, what are you doing here? We need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea right now. You're obviously still upset, and I really don't want to deal with more drama." I stepped forward, and something in my expression must have told her I wasn't leaving. She backed up, and I walked inside without being invited. The house was exactly as I remembered it. Same hardwood floors, same furniture we'd picked out together 5 years ago when they'd first moved in. Family photos on the walls, including several of me with my grandchildren. I wondered if she felt any shame looking at those photos, knowing what she'd done. "Emily, we need to have a conversation. A real one. Not through text messages or angry phone calls, face to face." She crossed her arms defensively. "Fine. Say what you came to say." "Where's James?" "Upstairs. And he's staying there. This is between you and me." "No," I said quietly. "This involves him, too. Call him down." "Mom, I'm not going to—" "James. Now." Something in my tone made her pause. Maybe she heard the steel underneath it. Maybe she realized I wasn't the same woman who'd left for Vermont 4 weeks ago. Whatever it was, she turned and called up the stairs. "James, can you come down here?" Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Then James appeared, looking wary. He was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, but right now he looked small, cornered. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you." "Is it?" I asked. "Is it really good to see the woman whose home you stole?" The smile vanished. "Now wait just a minute. We didn't steal anything. Everything we did was legal." "Legal," I repeated. "You keep using that word. Do you know what else is legal, James? Forensic document analysis, private investigators, court orders, and I've employed all 3. Emily's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I know everything." I moved further into the living room, and they both backed up slightly like I was something dangerous. Maybe I was. "I know about the forged signature on the sales documents. I know about the months of unauthorized withdrawals from my account. I know about James's gambling debts." James's jaw tightened. "My finances are none of your business." "They became my business when you convinced my daughter to steal from me to pay them off." "We didn't steal," Emily interjected, her voice rising. "We used legal power of attorney. You signed it yourself." "For medical emergencies," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Not for you to sell my home while I was on vacation. Not for you to forge my signature on sales documents. Not for you to take everything I worked for and use it to clean up your husband's mess." Emily's hands were shaking now. "You don't understand. We were desperate. The bank was going to take our house. We had people calling at all hours demanding money. We didn't have a choice. You had a choice, I said, taking a step closer to her. You could have told me the truth. You could have asked for help. You could have filed for bankruptcy. You had a dozen different choices, and you chose to commit fraud. It's not fraud, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. I turned to look at him, really look at him, this man who I'd welcomed into my family, who I'd given money to over the years when Emily said he was between jobs, who I'd trusted because my daughter loved him. $250,000 in gambling debts, I said. 3 different casinos, online betting sites, private lenders charging 20% interest. Should I go on? His face flushed red. Who told you that? I hired a private investigator. She's very good at her job. She found everything. The debts, the failed business, the falsified tax documents. And my favorite part, the offshore account Emily opened 2 weeks after selling my home. Emily gasped. You had us investigated? What did you think I was going to do? Just accept that you'd stolen from me. Just move on and find a new place to live while you spent my money. You forgot who raised you, Emily. You forgot that I spent 40 years working in law. Did you really think I wouldn't fight back? She sat down heavily on the couch, her hands covering her face. This is insane. You're supposed to be my mother. You're supposed to support me. I was your mother. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college. I helped you with the down payment on this house. I babysat your children so you could build your career, and you repaid all of that by forging my signature and selling my home. We were going to give you some of the money, Emily said weakly, once we got the debts under control. Some of the money, I repeated. How generous. Tell me, Emily, how much of my $1.7 million is left. Silence. Neither of them answered. I'll tell you how much. About $500,000. You spent or hid $1.2 million in 3 weeks. $1.2 million that wasn't yours to spend. James moved toward the door like he was thinking about leaving. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do. I said because Monday morning I'm going to court. I'm filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all of your accounts and reverse the sale of my penthouse. I'm also pressing charges for fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and misuse of power of attorney. Emily's head snapped up. Elder abuse, Mom, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. What you did fits the legal definition perfectly. You exploited your position of trust to steal from an elderly person. That's textbook elder abuse. I'm your daughter, she said, tears starting to stream down her face. How can you do this to me? How can you send your own daughter to jail? I looked at her. This woman I'd given birth to, raised, loved unconditionally for 40 years, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her. She'd burned all of that away when she decided I was worth less than money. I'm not sending you to jail, I said quietly. You sent yourself there the moment you forged my signature. I'm just making sure you get there. This is ridiculous, James said, finding his voice again. You can't prove any of this, can't I? I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd saved copies of everything. I have the forensic analysis showing 8 distinct differences between my real signature and the forged one. I have bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals. I have emails from 5 months ago where Emily discussed selling my home. I have text messages where she asked a real estate agent about power of attorney sales. I have evidence of your gambling debts, your failed business, your tax fraud. I have everything, James. Everything. The color drained from his face. Emily was sobbing now. Mom, please think about your grandchildren. If we go to jail, what happens to them? And there it was. The manipulation I'd been expecting. Use the grandchildren as leverage. Make me feel guilty for holding her accountable. You should have thought about your children before you committed fraud, I said. You should have thought about them before you decided to steal from their grandmother. You made choices, Emily. You chose this path, and now you get to live with the consequences. We can pay you back, James said desperately. We'll sell this house. We'll get jobs. We'll pay back every penny. With what money you've already spent most of it. And even if you hadn't, this isn't about money anymore. This is about trust. This is about family. This is about 2 people who looked at someone who loved them and saw nothing but an opportunity. I turned toward the door, done with this conversation, done with their excuses and their tears and their desperate attempts to avoid responsibility. Wait, Emily called out. Mom, please. There has to be some way to fix this, some way to make this right. I paused at the door and looked back at her. There was a way to make this right. It was called not doing it in the first place. It was called being honest. It was called treating your mother with respect instead of like an ATM you could rob whenever you needed cash. So that's it, she asked. You're just going to destroy your own family. I'm not destroying anything, I said. You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I walked out, closing the door behind me. Behind it, I could hear Emily's sobs and James's angry voice. But I didn't go back, didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess myself. As I drove away from that house, I felt something settle inside me, a sense of rightness, of purpose. Emily had gambled that I wouldn't fight back, that maternal love would override justice, that I'd choose family harmony over holding her accountable. She'd lost that bet, and on Monday she'd find out just how much that loss was going to cost her. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a biting wind. I stood on the courthouse steps clutching my purse and the folder containing copies of all our evidence. Andrew was beside me, his briefcase in one hand and a coffee in the other. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. I'd been ready since the moment I stood on my own driveway and realized what Emily had done. The courthouse was busy. People streaming in and out, lawyers in expensive suits, families looking worried, and lost court officers directing traffic. I'd been in buildings like this countless times during my years as a paralegal, but it felt different when you were the one seeking justice. We went through security and made our way to the third floor, Judge Sarah Rodriguez's courtroom. Andrew had told me she was fair, but no nonsense. She didn't tolerate games or manipulation. That was exactly what I needed. Emily and James weren't there yet. I was glad. I didn't want to see them before we had to face each other in front of the judge. We sat on a bench outside the courtroom and Andrew reviewed his notes one more time. "The emergency injunction hearing should be straightforward," he said. "We're asking the judge to freeze the property transfer and all associated accounts pending a full trial. Given the evidence we have, I'm confident she'll grant it." "And then what?" "Then we wait for a trial date. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. The courts are backlogged, but the injunction will protect your interests in the meantime. They won't be able to touch any more of the money, and the couple living in your penthouse will be notified that the ownership is in dispute." A few months. The thought of living in a hotel for months made my chest tighten. But what choice did I have, Mrs. Wilson? I looked up. A young woman in a business suit stood before us holding a tablet. "I'm Amanda Lee, victim advocate with the district attorney's office. May I speak with you for a moment?" Andrew nodded, and I stood to follow her to a quieter corner. "I've been reviewing your case," Amanda said gently. "The DA is very interested in pursuing criminal charges against your daughter and son-in-law. Elder abuse cases are a priority for our office. But I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for what that means?" "What does it mean?" "It means this goes beyond civil court. Criminal charges carry the possibility of jail time for both of them. I need to know that you understand that and are willing to proceed." I thought about my grandchildren, about Emily's face when she'd begged me to think about them, about the family dinners we'd never have again, about the life I'd imagined having with my daughter and her family. Then I thought about standing in front of my own door with nowhere to go, about the forged signature, about the months of planning, about $1.2 million spent in 3 weeks. "Yes," I said, "I'm willing to proceed." Amanda nodded. "Good. We'll coordinate with your civil attorney. Whatever happens in your case today will help inform our criminal investigation." She left, and I returned to Andrew just as Emily and James arrived with their lawyer. I'd never seen their attorney before. He looked young, maybe 35, with an overly confident swagger that immediately put me on edge. Emily wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the floor, her hand gripping James's arm. James, on the other hand, stared at me with barely concealed anger. Their lawyer approached Andrew. "Hamilton, I'm Michael Bennett. I'm hoping we can resolve this without wasting the court's time. Your client is obviously confused about the legal parameters of the power of attorney. Perhaps if we sat down and explained it to her." "My client isn't confused about anything," Andrew said coolly. "She's the victim of fraud, and we have extensive evidence to prove it." "Evidence that you obtained through illegal surveillance, I'd imagine," Bennett shot back. "Any private investigation conducted was completely legal and conducted by a licensed investigator," Andrew finished. "Nice try, though." The courtroom doors opened and a clerk called us inside. "Case number 2025 CV8847, Wilson v. Blackwood." We filed in and took our positions, Emily James and their lawyer on one side, Andrew and me on the other. The judge's bench loomed above us, empty for now. All rise for the Honorable Judge Sarah Rodriguez. Judge Rodriguez entered through a side door. She was a woman in her 50s with short dark hair streaked with gray and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She sat, adjusted her glasses, and opened the file in front of her. "This is a hearing on an emergency motion for injunction," she said. "Mr. Hamilton, you're representing the plaintiff." "Yes, Your Honor." "And Mr. Bennett, you're representing the defendants." "Correct, Your Honor." "Mr. Hamilton, make your case." Andrew stood and launched into our argument. He was precise, methodical, building the case piece by piece. He presented the forged signature analysis, the timeline of events, the evidence of planning the unauthorized withdrawals, James's gambling debts, everything we'd gathered over the past week. Judge Rodriguez listened intently, occasionally making notes. She asked clarifying questions that showed she understood exactly what was at stake. When Andrew finished, Bennett stood to respond. "Your Honor, the defense maintains that Mrs. Emily Blackwood acted within her legal rights under the power of attorney. Her mother signed this document voluntarily. The language is broad enough to encompass financial decisions. There's no fraud here, just a family disagreement about the extent of authority granted." "Mr. Bennett," the judge said, "are you seriously arguing that forging someone's signature falls within the scope of power of attorney?" "We dispute that the signature was forged, Your Honor. Mrs. Sophia Wilson is 72 years old. It's possible her signature has simply changed over time due to natural aging." I felt my hands clench into fists. He was calling me old and senile without saying the words directly. Andrew stood immediately. "Your Honor, we have a certified forensic document examiner who will testify that the signature is definitively forged. We also have Mrs. Wilson's doctor prepared to testify that she has no cognitive impairment whatsoever. She's sharp, competent, and fully aware of what was done to her." Judge Rodriguez looked at me directly. "Mrs. Wilson, did you authorize the sale of your penthouse?" I stood. "No, Your Honor. I had no knowledge of the sale until I returned home from vacation and found strangers living there." "And the power of attorney you signed, what was your understanding of its purpose?" "It was for medical emergencies only, Your Honor. I signed it before heart surgery 2 years ago. My lawyer recommended it as a precaution." The judge turned back to Bennett. "Mr. Bennett, do you have any evidence that Mrs. Wilson intended to grant her daughter authority to sell her property?" He shuffled through papers. "Not specific evidence, Your Honor, but the power of attorney document does grant broad financial authority." "For medical purposes," Andrew interjected. "The document specifically states it's meant to cover medical decisions and associated financial matters, hospital bills, not real estate transactions." Judge Rodriguez was silent for a long moment, reading through the power of attorney document herself. Finally, she looked up. "I'm granting the emergency injunction. All accounts associated with the sale of the property are frozen as of this moment. The property transfer is stayed pending full trial." My heart leapt. The first step. "Mr. Bennett, your clients are not to dispose of any assets or make any large financial transactions without court approval. Is that clear?" "Your Honor, this will cause significant hardship for my clients. They have bills to pay, children to support." "They should have thought of that before allegedly forging signatures and selling property that wasn't theirs to sell," the judge said sharply. "The injunction stands. We'll schedule a full hearing for," she consulted her calendar, 6 weeks from today. That will give both sides time to prepare their cases thoroughly. 6 weeks. That meant 6 more weeks in a hotel, 6 more weeks in limbo. But it also meant Emily and James couldn't touch what was left of my money, couldn't hide more assets, couldn't run. "This court is adjourned." As we filed out, Emily finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, her face drawn. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but James pulled her away. Outside the courtroom, Andrew shook my hand. That went exactly as we hoped. The judge saw through their arguments immediately. 6 weeks, I said. That's a long time to wait. "Use it," Andrew advised. "Rest. Build up your strength. We have a solid case, but the full trial is going to be intense. Bennett is going to try every trick in the book to make you look vindictive or confused. You need to be ready." I nodded. 6 weeks suddenly felt like both too long and not long enough. The days that followed were strange. I was in limbo, caught between the life I'd had and the life I was trying to reclaim. I stayed in my hotel room most days working with Andrew to prepare for trial. We went over testimony, practiced responses to questions I might be asked, reviewed evidence until I could recite it in my sleep. But at night alone in that generic hotel room, doubt crept in. What if the judge at the full trial didn't see things as clearly? What if Bennett found some legal loophole? What if I'd miscalculated and was about to lose everything for good? On those nights, I'd pull out my phone and look at photos of my penthouse, the view from the balcony, the reading nook, the kitchen where I'd baked cookies for my grandchildren, my home, my sanctuary, the physical representation of a lifetime of work. And then I'd remember Emily's voice on the phone. Stop being so dramatic. The casual dismissal, the complete lack of remorse. No, I wasn't wrong. I wasn't being vindictive. I was fighting for what was mine, for justice, for the principle that you can't just take what you want from people and walk away. 1 week into our 6-week wait, Andrew called with disturbing news. Bennett filed a motion challenging the validity of the injunction. He said, his voice tight with frustration. He's arguing that the power of attorney should stand, and he's got a psychiatric expert ready to testify that you might be experiencing early dementia. What? I nearly dropped the phone. That's absurd. It is absurd, and we're going to fight it. But it means we need to do a counter-evaluation with a geriatric psychiatrist of our own choosing, and we need to do it quickly. 2 days later, I found myself in the office of Dr. Elena Patel, a renowned geriatric psychiatrist with 30 years of experience. She ran me through a battery of tests, memory exercises, cognitive assessments, emotional evaluations. After 3 hours, she sat back and smiled. Mrs. Wilson, you're sharper than most of my 50-year-old patients. There is absolutely no evidence of cognitive impairment of any kind. I wasn't surprised, but I was relieved. Will you testify to that in court? With pleasure, she said. I find it especially offensive when people weaponize mental health to discredit elderly individuals. What your daughter is trying to do, claiming you're mentally incompetent to cover her fraud, it's a tactic I've seen before, and I take great satisfaction in shutting it down. Andrew submitted Dr. Patel's evaluation to the court, and Judge Rodriguez swiftly denied Bennett's motion. But the episode left me shaken. Emily was willing to publicly declare me mentally incompetent just to get away with what she'd done. How far would she go? I got my answer the following week when Andrew called again, this time sounding genuinely worried. Sophia, have you been contacted by anyone from the media? No, why? Bennett has leaked details of the case to several news outlets. They're spinning it as a sad story of an elderly woman with dementia whose daughter had to make difficult decisions for her welfare. They're trying to paint you as confused, and Emily as the caring daughter just looking out for her mother's best interests. My hands started to shake. They can't do that. It's not true. I know. We're issuing a statement countering their claims, but you need to be prepared. The court of public opinion can be brutal. You might get calls from reporters, and there's a chance this could be picked up by local news. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. I never thought it would get this messy. Do you want to reconsider? We could still negotiate a settlement. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. If they want to fight dirty, let them. The truth is on our side. The media storm hit the next day. A local news station ran a segment titled Family Feud over Manhattan Penthouse Dementia or Deception. They interviewed sources close to the family who claimed I'd been showing signs of memory loss for years. They questioned whether I was being manipulated by greedy lawyers, hoping for a big payday. The comments on the online version of the story were split. Some people expressed outrage on my behalf. Others criticized me for destroying my family over material possessions. I was furious. Emily and James were using the media to try to pressure me into dropping the case. They knew I was a private person. They knew public scrutiny would be painful for me. What they didn't know was that it only strengthened my resolve. Andrew arranged for me to meet with a reporter from a competing news outlet who was known for her thorough investigative work. I shared the forensic evidence, the paper trail of Emily's planning the documented history of James's gambling. I spoke clearly and confidently, demonstrating beyond any doubt that I was in full command of my faculties. The resulting piece, Elder Abuse Disguised as Care, the dark truth behind the Wilson family battle, turned the tide of public opinion. Other outlets picked up the story. Victim advocates used my case as an example of the growing problem of financial exploitation of the elderly. Emily and James's media strategy had backfired spectacularly, but they weren't done fighting. Marcus, our private investigator, discovered that James had been inquiring about property in Argentina, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. He'd also made several large cash withdrawals just before the injunction froze their accounts. "They're planning to run," Marcus told us during an emergency meeting in Andrew's office. "I'd bet my reputation on it. They're gathering resources looking for a way to slip past the court's restrictions." Andrew immediately filed a motion to confiscate their passports. The judge granted it, ordering Emily and James to surrender their travel documents to the court within 24 hours. They complied, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they had a backup plan. People willing to commit fraud wouldn't hesitate to use fake passports if they felt cornered. Meanwhile, the emotional toll was mounting. I hadn't seen or spoken to my grandchildren since this began. Emily was using them as pawns, telling them their grandmother was trying to send their parents to jail. Lily at 12 was old enough to understand that things weren't that simple. She'd sent me a text message from her mother's phone, just a heart emoji, but it meant the world to me. 9-year-old Jacob, though, was fully under his parents' influence. According to Mrs. Goldstein, who'd run into Emily and the children at a grocery store, Jacob had asked loudly why, "Grandma wants to hurt Mommy and Daddy." The thought of my grandchildren believing I was the villain in this story broke my heart. But I couldn't let it break my determination. Someday, when they were older, they would understand the truth. 4 weeks into our 6-week wait, Andrew called with the unexpected development. "We've been approached by Nathan and Olivia Parker, the couple who bought your penthouse. They want to meet with us." "Why?" I asked, immediately suspicious. "Are they going to try to pressure me to drop the case?" "Actually, no. They say they have information that might help us. Something about their interactions with Emily during the sale process that raised red flags, but they ignored at the time." I agreed to meet them the next day in Andrew's office. When they arrived, they looked uncomfortable, but determined. Nathan Parker was a tall, serious man who worked in finance. Olivia was a pediatrician with kind eyes and a gentle manner. They weren't the villains in this story any more than I was. They were just another set of victims caught in Emily and James's web of deception. First, Nathan said, "We want you to know we're heartbroken about this situation. If we'd had any idea what was really happening, we never would have gone through with the purchase." "We felt terrible since we found out," Olivia added. "We've been living in your home knowing it was taken from you through fraud. It's been eating at us." I appreciated their sincerity. "Thank you for that. But Andrew said you have information that might help." Nathan nodded. During the closing, there was a moment when the notary Kevin Foster seemed uncomfortable. Emily had brought all these documents supposedly signed by you, but when Mr. Foster asked her some detailed questions about when and where you had signed them, she got flustered. "James jumped in," Olivia continued. "He said you were having a good day when you signed, and that sometimes your memory wasn't reliable. He used the phrase good day in a way that implied you had dementia or something similar." "Which made us uncomfortable," Nathan added. "But then Emily produced the power of attorney document, and our lawyer said everything was in order legally." "There's more," Olivia said hesitantly. "After the closing, when we were all walking out, we overheard James say to Emily, 'She'll never know. By the time she gets back, it'll be too late.' At the time, we thought maybe you were being moved to a care facility and they were keeping it from you temporarily to avoid upsetting you. Now you realize they were talking about the sale itself," Andrew finished. Nathan nodded grimly. "We've already given statements to the police, but we wanted to tell you in person. We're prepared to testify at the trial if needed." "We also want you to know," Olivia said, leaning forward, "that we'll vacate the penthouse immediately if the court rules in your favor. We won't fight it. We understand it's your home and it was stolen from you." I was touched by their decency. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." After they left, Andrew looked at me with a small smile. "That's a significant development. Disinterested third-party witnesses who overheard James essentially admitting to the fraud that's going to be powerful in court." I felt a wave of relief. The case was getting stronger every day. But Emily and James had one more trick up their sleeves. 2 days before the trial, Andrew called with rage in his voice I'd never heard before. "They filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 7. What does that mean for our case? It means they're trying to throw a wrench in the works. Filing for bankruptcy triggers an automatic stay on all civil proceedings against them. They're hoping to delay our case indefinitely." My heart sank. "Can they do that?" "They can try," Andrew said grimly. "But bankruptcy doesn't protect you from criminal proceedings, and it doesn't shield assets obtained through fraud. I'm filing an emergency motion to lift the stay as it pertains to our case, arguing that this is a transparent attempt to abuse the bankruptcy process to conceal fraud. Will it work? I think so, but it means more delays, more legal fees, more stress for you. I closed my eyes, suddenly feeling every one of my 72 years. How much longer, Andrew? How much more can they drag this out? His voice softened. I know it's exhausting, Sophia, but remember what we're fighting for. Not just your home, but justice. They're getting desperate. Each of these desperate moves is just more evidence of their guilt. He was right. I couldn't give up now. Not when we were so close. Judge Rodriguez heard Andrew's emergency motion the next day and saw through Emily and James's bankruptcy ploy immediately. She lifted the stay as it pertained to our case, and even ordered them to pay our additional legal fees as a sanction for their bad faith filing. It was a significant victory, but I knew the real battle was still to come. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I paced my hotel room, rehearsing answers to potential questions, going over the timeline of events again and again. I wasn't nervous about the facts, those were clear. I was nervous about facing Emily, about seeing my child in a courtroom as an adversary. No matter how justified my actions were, no matter how much she deserved consequences, there was still a small part of me, the mother part, that ached at the thought of what tomorrow would bring. I stood by the window looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there was my penthouse, my home, so close and yet still beyond my reach. Give me strength, I whispered to no one in particular. Give me the strength to finish this. Marcus Rivera called early on the morning of the trial, his voice urgent. Mrs. Wilson, I've discovered something you need to know before court today. What is it? I was already dressed, ready to leave for the courthouse in an hour. James Blackwood has been making travel arrangements. Despite surrendering his passport, he managed to obtain a fake one through contacts in Atlantic City. He has a private flight scheduled to Buenos Aires tonight at 11 p.m. One-way tickets for himself, Emily, and both children. My blood ran cold. They're planning to flee the country today. Yes, and there's more. I've traced more money than we initially thought. Beyond the Cayman Islands account, they've been wiring smaller amounts to a bank in Argentina for months, even before they sold your penthouse. The total is close to $300,000. So this wasn't just about James's gambling debts, I said, the realization dawning. They were planning to leave the country all along. It looks that way. James has been in contact with business associates in Buenos Aires since January. I think the gambling debts were real, but they were also a convenient excuse. The real plan was to cash out everything they could, your penthouse, their house, any liquid assets, and disappear before any criminal charges could be filed. Does Andrew know? I'm calling him next. I've also notified the district attorney's office. They're preparing to move on the criminal charges immediately, possibly even today after the civil trial. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. Just doing my job, Mrs. Wilson. Good luck today. I'll be there to testify. I hung up, my mind racing. Emily and James weren't just desperate, they were dangerous. People willing to uproot their children, flee the country, and abandon their entire lives were capable of anything. I called Andrew, who'd already heard from Marcus. This changes our strategy slightly, he said. We're going to ask the judge to remand them into custody immediately after the verdict, arguing that they're flight risks. The DA's office is fully on board. Will that work? If we can prove they were planning to flee, absolutely. I arrived at the courthouse early, my stomach in knots. Andrew met me at the entrance, his expression serious. Ready for this? I nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. The media attention had drawn spectators. I saw Mrs. Goldstein sitting near the back. She gave me an encouraging nod. My friend Margaret from book club was there too, along with several other neighbors from my building. Their support meant more than they could know. Emily and James were already seated with Bennett. Emily looked pale and drawn. James was sweating visibly, his eyes darting around the room. They both seemed on edge, not just nervous about the trial, but jittery, like they were watching the clock. Now I knew why. They were counting down the hours until their escape. Judge Rodriguez entered, and we all rose. After the preliminaries, she looked out at the courtroom with a stern expression. I want to be very clear about something before we begin. This is not a reality TV show. This is not entertainment. This is a serious legal proceeding involving allegations of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. I expect decorum and respect from everyone in this courtroom. Is that understood? The gallery murmured agreement. Good. Mr. Hamilton, you may proceed with your opening statement. Andrew stood and addressed the judge. We'd decided to waive a jury trial, believing Judge Rodriguez would be less susceptible to emotional manipulation than a jury might be. Your Honor, this case is about trust betrayed and vulnerability exploited. Sophia Wilson worked her entire life to purchase her home outright. She saved, she sacrificed, she built security for herself. And while she was away on vacation, her daughter Emily Blackwood used a power of attorney intended for medical emergencies to sell that home without her knowledge or consent. He went on to outline our case, the forged signature, the months of planning, the evidence of financial misconduct, the hidden offshore accounts. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was a calculated, premeditated scheme to steal Mrs. Wilson's assets. And when confronted, the defendants didn't apologize or try to make amends. They doubled down, claiming legal right to what they had taken through fraud. Today, we will prove beyond any doubt that their actions were not just unethical, but illegal, and we will ask the court to restore Mrs. Wilson's property to her and award damages for the emotional distress and financial hardship she has endured. Bennett's opening statement was what we expected, painting Emily as a caring daughter, making difficult decisions for an aging mother, suggesting I was more impaired than I admitted, implying the power of attorney gave her broad discretion. But there was something half-hearted about his delivery. Perhaps he'd finally realized how overwhelming our evidence was. Or perhaps he knew his clients were planning to be out of the country before any judgment could be enforced. Diana Chen, our forensic document examiner, was the first witness. She meticulously presented her analysis of the forged signature, showing 8 distinct differences between my authentic signature and the one on the sales documents. Her testimony was clear, professional, and devastating to Emily and James's case. Next came Dr. Patel, who testified to my excellent cognitive health. Mrs. Wilson displays no signs of impairment whatsoever. Her memory, reasoning, and decision-making capabilities are all fully intact, comparable to someone decades younger. My own testimony followed. I told the story from the beginning, the vacation, the return home, the discovery of the sale, the confrontation with Emily. I described finding evidence of the small withdrawals over months, the emails showing planning dating back 5 months, the forged documents. Throughout my testimony, I kept my voice steady, my responses clear and concise. I didn't let emotion overwhelm me, even when recounting the most painful moments. I wanted the judge to see me as I was rational, competent, and deeply wronged. Bennett's cross-examination was aggressive, but ineffective. He tried to suggest I'd had conversations about selling the penthouse that I'd forgotten. He tried to paint my relationship with Emily as strained before these events, implying I was using the court to punish her for past grievances. He even suggested I'd verbally given her permission to handle my affairs however she saw fit. I calmly refuted each claim, never raising my voice, never showing anger, just steadfast certainty in the truth. When Bennett finished, Andrew called Marcus Rivera to the stand. This was where our strategy shifted to address the new information. Marcus testified about James's gambling debts and the failed business, but then moved on to the evidence of their planned escape. Your Honor, I have documented evidence that the defendants have purchased one-way tickets to Buenos Aires, Argentina for tonight at 11 p.m. Despite surrendering their passports to the court, Mr. Blackwood obtained a fraudulent passport through contacts in Atlantic City. They have been transferring money to Argentine bank accounts for months, totaling approximately $300,000. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Emily's face drained of color. James looked like he might be sick. Judge Rodriguez banged her gavel. Order, Mr. Bennett. Is your client aware that attempting to flee the country while under court order is a serious criminal offense? Bennett looked stunned. He turned to James, who whispered frantically in his ear. The lawyer's expression shifted from surprise to resignation. Your Honor, may I have a brief recess to confer with my clients? You may have 15 minutes, Mr. Bennett, but be aware that I am taking Mr. Rivera's testimony very seriously, and if it proves accurate, there will be significant consequences. As they left the courtroom, Andrew turned to me. This is it, Sophia. They're cornered. They know it. Bennett is probably going to try to negotiate a settlement now, something to keep them out of jail. I don't want a settlement, I said firmly. I want my home back, and I want justice. And you'll get both, he assured me. But if they offer a full return of the property and all remaining funds accepting, it might be the quickest way to resolve this. The 15-minute recess stretched to 30 as Bennett negotiated with the district attorney who had arrived shortly after Marcus's testimony. Finally, everyone returned to the courtroom. Bennett stood looking defeated. Your Honor, in light of the evidence presented, my clients wish to concede to the plaintiff's demands. They will agree to reverse the sale of the property at 1847 Park Avenue, Unit 15G, return all remaining funds from the sale, and pay reasonable damages for emotional distress. In exchange, they ask that the court consider leniency regarding the criminal implications of their actions. Andrew stood. Your Honor, my client is willing to accept the return of her property and funds, but we believe the criminal matters should be handled separately by the District Attorney's Office. The planned flight to Argentina demonstrates that the defendants cannot be trusted to comply with the court's orders without significant enforcement mechanisms in place. Judge Rodriguez considered for a moment. I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Bennett, your client's attempted flight suggests they have no intention of accepting responsibility for their actions. I am ordering the immediate return of the property at 1847 Park Avenue, Unit 15G, to Mrs. Wilson. All remaining funds from the sale must be returned within 24 hours. Damages in the amount of $250,000 are awarded for emotional distress and legal fees. She paused, her expression hardening. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for immediate criminal prosecution on charges of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and attempted flight to avoid prosecution. Given the flight risk, the defendants will be remanded into custody until arraignment on those charges. She banged her gavel. Bailiff, please take the defendants into custody. 2 court officers moved toward Emily and James. Emily began to sob. James looked shell-shocked, like he couldn't believe what was happening. As they were being handcuffed, Emily looked at me, her eyes pleading. Mom, please, don't let them do this. Think about the kids. Please. For the first time that day, emotion threatened to overwhelm me. My grandchildren. What would happen to them? As if reading my thoughts, Judge Rodriguez spoke again. Mrs. Wilson, do you have any relationship with your grandchildren? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I was very close to them before this happened. Would you be willing and able to care for them temporarily while their parents' case proceeds? I didn't hesitate. Absolutely, Your Honor. Very well. I'll notify Child Protective Services to arrange temporary custody with you, assuming you pass their standard checks, which I have no reason to doubt you will. Emily's sobs grew louder. You're taking our children too. Mom, how could you? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and felt an odd mixture of sadness and resolve. I'm not taking them, Emily. I'm protecting them, just like I'm protecting myself. Something you should have thought about before you decided to steal from me and flee the country. The bailiff led them away, and suddenly it was over. The battle was won. My home would be returned. Justice would be served. But as I stood in that courtroom watching my only child being led away in handcuffs, victory felt nothing like I'd imagined it would. The courtroom emptied slowly. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. Spectators drifted away discussing the dramatic conclusion, and eventually only Andrew Marcus and I remained along with a representative from Child Protective Services who had been summoned by the judge. Mrs. Wilson, the woman introduced herself. I'm Rachel Torres with CPS. We need to discuss temporary custody arrangements for your grandchildren. The reality of what had just happened hit me fully. Emily and James were in custody. My grandchildren would be coming to live with me, but I didn't even have a home yet. I'm still in a hotel, I said, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. I don't have space for them there. Andrew stepped in smoothly. The judge's order returning the property to Mrs. Wilson is effective immediately. How quickly can the current occupants vacate? The Parkers already told me they'd leave as soon as the court ruled, I said. They've been very understanding about the whole situation. That's good news, Rachel said. In the meantime, we'll place the children with a temporary foster family for a day or two while you get your home ready. I'll need to inspect the property before the children can move in, but given the circumstances, we can expedite that process. I nodded, still trying to process everything. How are they? The children, do they know what's happening? Rachel's expression softened. They're being picked up from school now. We'll explain that their parents are helping the police with an investigation and that they'll be staying with you for a while. We try to keep the details age appropriate. They're good kids, I said. This isn't their fault. None of it is. We understand that, Rachel assured me. Our priority is their well-being and minimizing trauma. Having a loving grandmother they already know will help enormously. After exchanging contact information and making arrangements to meet the following day, Rachel left. Marcus excused himself as well, leaving Andrew and me alone in the courtroom. "We won, Sophia," he said quietly. "You got your home back. You got justice." I nodded but couldn't find words. The victory felt hollow somehow. Yes, I'd reclaimed what was rightfully mine. Yes, Emily and James would face consequences for their actions. But at what cost? My daughter was going to jail. My grandchildren had lost their parents, at least temporarily. The family I'd known was shattered beyond repair. "It doesn't feel like I thought it would," I finally admitted. Andrew sat beside me, his expression understanding. "It rarely does. Justice isn't always clean or satisfying. It's messy, complicated, and often painful, but it was still the right thing to do." "Was it? Sometimes I wonder if I should have just let it go, found another place to live, kept the family together. And what lesson would that have taught Emily, that she could steal from you with impunity, that there are no consequences for betraying the people who love you?" He shook his head. "Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is hold people accountable for their actions. It's the only way they learn." I knew he was right, but it didn't ease the ache in my chest. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we get you back home. The Parkers will need to move out, and there will be paperwork to process officially transferring the property back to you. The DA will handle the criminal case against Emily and James. Given the evidence, they'll likely be offered plea deals to avoid a full trial." "How much time will they serve?" "That depends on the plea negotiations, but for first-time offenders, probably 18 to 24 months with parole eligibility after serving half that time. The good news is that this means the children won't be without their parents forever, and in the meantime, they'll have you." I nodded, drawing a deep breath. "Then I need to focus on making a home for them. For all of us." Andrew squeezed my hand. "That's the spirit. One step at a time." The next morning, I called Nathan Parker. He was gracious and apologetic, assuring me they would be out of the penthouse by the weekend. "We've already found a short-term rental," he explained. "We're just glad this is being resolved. We never wanted to live in a home that was obtained through fraud." "I appreciate your understanding," I told him sincerely. "None of this was your fault. You were victims too." "Not like you were," he said. "We'll lose some money on the deal, but we can recover from that. What your daughter did to you, that's a different kind of loss entirely." His words stayed with me as I began preparing for my grandchildren's arrival. I made arrangements for a cleaning service to go through the penthouse once the Parkers left. I ordered new bedding, toiletries, and age-appropriate books and games. I contacted the school to ensure they knew about the change in custody and to arrange for homework to be sent home. I was moving forward, focusing on practical matters, keeping too busy to dwell on the emotional toll of everything that had happened. On Saturday afternoon, Nathan Parker called to let me know they had removed the last of their belongings. He would leave the keys with the doorman. My home was mine again. I drove to the building with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. What would it feel like to walk through that door again? Would it still feel like home after everything that had happened? Mrs. Goldstein was watering the hallway plants when I stepped off the elevator. She set down her watering can and embraced me warmly. "Welcome home, dear," she said, her eyes moist. "We've all missed you." "Thank you," I managed to say through the lump in my throat. "It's good to be back." I approached my door, still painted that unfamiliar gray, and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly this time. The door swung open and I stepped inside. The layout was the same, but the furnishings were all different. The Parkers had their own style, modern minimalist, nothing like my traditional decor. The walls that had once held my paintings were bare. The corner where my reading chair had stood by the fireplace was occupied by a sleek leather recliner. It was my apartment, but not my home. Not yet. I walked through each room, slowly taking inventory. The master bedroom where I'd slept for decades. The guest room that would now belong to Lily. The small den that would become Jacob's space. The kitchen where I'd hosted countless family dinners. So many memories in these walls. Some beautiful, some now painful. Could we make new memories here? Better ones. I ended my tour on the balcony looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The view, at least, was unchanged. The same buildings, the same slice of Central Park in the distance, the same rhythm of traffic below. I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. One chapter of my life had ended. Another was beginning. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same resilience that had gotten me this far. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Rachel Torres from CPS. Mrs. Wilson, I'd like to schedule the home inspection for tomorrow morning if that works for you. If everything checks out, the children could move in as early as tomorrow afternoon. So soon? I hadn't expected things to move this quickly. The apartment was empty except for the Parkers' furniture, which they'd agreed to leave until I could get my belongings out of storage. We try to minimize the time children spend in temporary foster care, especially when there's a suitable family member available. Is tomorrow too soon? No, I said, making a quick mental calculation. I can have the essential rooms ready by then. Their bedrooms, the kitchen, the bathroom. That's all we need to see. We understand this is an unusual situation. We're not expecting perfection, just a safe, clean environment where the children's basic needs can be met. After hanging up, I sprang into action. I called a local department store and arranged for rush delivery of essentials, towels, sheets, kitchenware. I contacted the storage facility where Emily had placed my furniture and arranged for selective delivery of key pieces the following week. By Sunday morning, I'd transformed the empty penthouse into a livable if sparse home. The beds were made with fresh linens. The refrigerator was stocked with kid-friendly foods. The bathrooms had towels, soap, and toothbrushes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Rachel arrived promptly at 9 a.m., clipboard in hand. She was professional but kind as she inspected each room, noting the emergency exits, checking that the smoke detectors worked, examining the kitchen for potential hazards. "Everything looks good, Mrs. Wilson," she said finally. "You've done an amazing job getting this ready so quickly. I can tell you're committed to providing a good home for your grandchildren." "They're all I have now," I said simply. Rachel's expression softened. "I know this isn't how you imagined becoming their caregiver, but children are resilient, and having a loving grandparent makes an enormous difference in situations like this." "Have you spoken to them? Do they understand what's happening?" "We've explained that their parents need to resolve some legal issues and that they'll be staying with you for a while." Lily seems to understand more than she's letting on. She asked if this was about what Mommy and Daddy did to Grandma's house. "Jacob is confused but excited about staying with you. He asked if you still make those chocolate chip cookies he likes." I smiled despite the heaviness in my heart. "I'll make them today. I'll bring them by around 3 p.m. They're each packing a suitcase with their favorite things. Is there anything else you need before then?" I shook my head. "I think we'll figure it out as we go." The hours until 3 p.m. crawled by. I baked cookies, arranged the children's rooms to be as welcoming as possible, and tried to prepare myself emotionally for what was to come. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart raced. I opened the door to find Rachel with Lily and Jacob each clutching a suitcase and looking uncertain. "Grandma!" Jacob dropped his suitcase and threw his arms around my waist. His simple affection brought tears to my eyes. Lily hung back, her expression guarded. At 12, she was old enough to sense that something serious had happened, but too young to fully comprehend the complexities of the situation. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently, not pushing for physical contact. "I'm so glad you're here." She nodded her eyes, taking in the apartment behind me. "This is your house, the one Mom sold?" "Yes, this is my home. Our home now for as long as you need to stay." "Where's all your stuff?" Jacob asked, peering around the sparse living room. "It's in storage. We'll get it delivered this week. For now, I've set up your bedrooms with the essentials. Would you like to see—" Jacob nodded eagerly, but Lily remained hesitant. "When can we see Mom and Dad?" she asked, her voice small but determined. I exchanged a glance with Rachel, who gave a slight nod, encouraging me to be honest, but age-appropriate. "They're helping the police right now," I explained. "There are some legal matters they need to resolve. It might be a while before you can visit them, but I'm sure we can arrange phone calls soon." "Did they do something bad?" Lily pressed, her perceptiveness breaking my heart. "They made some mistakes," I said carefully. "Grown-up mistakes that have consequences. But that doesn't change how much they love you or how much I love you." "Is that why they sold your house, because they made a mistake?" "Yes, honey, that's part of it. But what's important now is that we're together and we're going to be okay." "All right," she nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to accept this explanation for now. After Rachel left, I showed the children their rooms. Jacob immediately began unpacking, arranging his toys and books with the efficient enthusiasm of a 9-year-old. Lily was more methodical, carefully placing her clothes in drawers, positioning her stuffed animals on the bed, just so. "I didn't bring everything," she explained, "because we'll go home eventually, right?" Of course, I assured her, though I had no idea when or if that would be possible. But while you're here, I want you to feel like this is your home too. We can get anything you need that you didn't bring. The first few days were a blur of adjustments, establishing new routines, learning the rhythms of their days, discovering that Lily needed absolute quiet to do her homework, while Jacob preferred background music, finding out that neither of them liked crusts on their sandwiches, a detail I'd somehow forgotten. A week after they moved in, Andrew called with news about Emily and James. They've both been offered plea deals, he informed me. Emily is looking at teen months with eligibility for parole after 9 months. James, because of the tax fraud and gambling charges, is facing 24 months with parole possible after 12. Have they accepted? James has. Emily is still considering it. She's authorized Bennett to approach us about a possible visitation arrangement with the children. Would you be open to that? I thought about Lily's questions, Jacob's occasional nightmares, the way both children sometimes fell silent in the middle of play, remembering their parents' absence. Yes, I said. They need to see their mother. Whatever Emily did to me, she's still their mother. 2 days later, I took the children to the detention center where Emily was being held pending her sentencing. The visiting area was stark, and institutional tables bolted to the floor guards watching from the corners, the smell of industrial cleaner hanging in the air. Emily entered wearing a beige jumpsuit, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by her surroundings. When she saw the children, her face crumpled with emotion. "My babies," she whispered, opening her arms. Jacob ran to her immediately. Lily hesitated, then followed, allowing herself to be enveloped in her mother's embrace. I stood back, giving them space for their reunion. The visit was emotional, but constrained by the circumstances. Emily asked about school friends, their new rooms at my apartment. She avoided discussing her case or James, who was being held in a different facility. When our time was nearly up, she finally looked at me directly. "Can I talk to you alone for a minute? The kids can wait with the guard by the door." I nodded, and after making sure the children were settled within sight, but out of earshot, I sat across from my daughter. "Thank you," she said, her voice low and strained, "for bringing them, for taking care of them. I know you didn't have to do that. They're my grandchildren. Of course I'm taking care of them. After what I did to you," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "This isn't about you and me right now. It's about them. They need stability, love, and as much normalcy as possible." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm taking the plea deal. My lawyer says it's the best option. I'll serve 9 months, maybe less, with good behavior." "That's probably wise. I want you to know—" She hesitated. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't make up for what I did. But I am sorry. More than I can ever express." I studied her face, looking for the manipulation, the calculation I'd come to expect. But all I saw was genuine remorse. Whether it was for her actions or merely for being caught, I couldn't be sure. "I believe you're sorry now," I said carefully. "But trust isn't rebuilt with words, Emily. It's rebuilt with actions over time." "I know. I want to try, though. When I get out, if you'll allow it, I want to try to make amends. Real amends. We'll see. I wasn't ready to make promises I might not be able to keep. For now, let's focus on what's best for the children." She nodded, accepting this boundary. "They look good. Happy even considering everything. You're doing a great job with them." "We're managing," I said, "day by day." The guard called time, and we rejoined the children for goodbye hugs and promises of another visit soon. As we walked out of the detention center, Lily slipped her hand into mine, the first time she'd initiated contact since coming to live with me. "Mommy looks sad," she observed. "Yes," I agreed. "She is sad. She misses you both very much. But she did something wrong, didn't she? Something to do with your house." I stopped walking and crouched down to meet her eyes. "Yes, Lily. She made some very serious mistakes. But making mistakes, even big ones, doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're human. Your mom loves you, and she's trying to make things right. By going to jail. By accepting the consequences of her actions. That takes courage." Lily considered this, her young face serious beyond her years. "When she gets out, will we live with her again, or with you?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart. We'll figure that out when the time comes. For now, you're staying with me, and we're going to be just fine." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I'm glad we're with you, Grandma, even though I miss Mom and Dad." You're allowed to miss them and be okay with me at the same time. Feelings are complicated like that. Jacob, who had been walking ahead, turned back impatiently. Can we get ice cream? You said maybe if we were good. You were both very good, I confirmed, grateful for his simple request that brought us back to the ordinary concerns of childhood. Ice cream it is. As we walked toward the ice cream shop, Lily still holding my hand and Jacob skipping ahead, I felt a surprising sense of peace settle over me. Not happiness that would take time, but a quiet acceptance of our new reality. My life had taken an unexpected turn. My relationship with my daughter was forever altered. But here I was, back in my home with 2 children who needed me. I had weathered the betrayal, fought for justice, and emerged stronger. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be more visits to detention centers, more difficult conversations, more adjustments, as we all learned to navigate this new normal. Eventually, Emily would be released, and we would have to find a way forward, whether that meant reconciliation or carefully managed distance. But I had survived the worst of it. I had changed the things I couldn't accept rather than accepting the things I couldn't change. I had shown my grandchildren that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, that setting boundaries isn't cruel, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions. These were lessons worth teaching even at such a high cost. As Jacob debated between chocolate and strawberry ice cream, and Lily leaned slightly against my shoulder, I allowed myself a moment of genuine optimism. We would be okay. Different than before, scarred but healing, finding our way toward whatever came next. One step at a time, one day at a time, together.